BearcatsSports.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, our daily look at an area football team and the key questions we're going to be answering about that team in Big Country Prep's preseason preview on August the 21st with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, we're talking about the Leon Bearcats.
And this to me is one of the more intriguing teams in the big country this year. They took a big step forward last year, went 7-5, got to the area round of the playoffs, just a huge improvement, and they return a ton of talent from last year's 7-5 team. 18 of their 22 lettermen are back, including 9 starters on both sides of the football. And among those are some really talented young skill guys. So I'm excited to see just how this plays out for DeLeon. Obviously, they have some questions to answer, like every team does, to achieve their goals, which I think are going to be a little more substantial than we've seen in recent years. But to me, on paper, this looks like a really fun DeLeon Bearcat squad.
All right, before we jump into tonight's show, we want to remind you YouTubers to please hit the subscribe button. Also, please hit the bell so you'll get daily notifications every time that Big Country Preps comes up with a new video.
All right, with that, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about these DeLeon Bearcats and what Coach Jacob Marwitz has to work with this year. We'll start with some of the biggest questions facing this group, and I think the biggest, and this is a positive, is what impact will the experience that this team have on their on-field product? I mean, you've got 18 of 22 players back from last year's team, 9 starters both sides of the football. These are kids who played a ton of football at very young ages, now are in juniors and seniors. I'm excited to see what impact that will have. I've mentioned this in past podcasts, but I think experience is the biggest key, the biggest predictor, often of success at the high school level. When you have a group of kids that have grown together, that are playing, I mean, obviously they can take their lumps as freshmen and sophomores. Once they get those juniors and senior years, you see the big step forward. And if they can do that this year with the group they've got, it's going to be exciting to see what they can accomplish.
My question for DeLeon is, what does Coach Marwitz have up his sleeve? You know what I mean? You don't just schedule teams like Stanford, Holly, and Munster on accident. Yeah, that just doesn't happen like that. Clearly, Coach Marwitz believes that they have a shot at taking a step forward, that they have a shot at going, and making a really nice run in the playoffs. And he is prepping this team for that, win or lose in non-district. That's a monstrous schedule he's got there. But I mean, if they play through it and get through fairly healthy, they will be battle tested going into district and ready for a nice run of the playoffs. If they qualify, and from the looks of things on paper, they're going to qualify.
Yeah, for sure. And there's really two sides to that coin too. Look at what Coach Abels and Coach Hutchinson have at Holly and Stanford. The expectations they have. You don't schedule DeLeon unless you think they can test you. So I think that there's an expectation outside of that program that's going to be a formidable test as well. The third question I have, and I think it's going to be a really exciting to watch as well, is you've got 2 juniors in that backfield, Heston Job and Jake Cooper, rather, quarterback, running back who had big years last year. Heston Job is one of the better dual threat quarterbacks in our area, had over 2,000 yards passing last year, ran for over 1,000 yards, a guy that can really light up that stat sheet. And then Cooper had almost 1,000 yards rushing out of the backfield and had over 400 yards receiving. So he's another guy that can really impact games in multiple ways. I'm excited to see how that backfield duo stacks up against some of the other best ones in our area. I think it's got an opportunity to be one of the most productive backfields in all of the big country. And the really exciting thing is those 2 guys are just juniors. They've been playing together for a while now, and those guys are just juniors. And it's going to be exciting to see what they can do now that they do have as much football as they do under their belts.
All right, with that, we're going to take a look at DeLeon's schedule for 2024. We'll start with the non-district portion. They'll start at area rival Dublin. They'll play host to Stanford in a very tough game on September the 6th. September 13th, we'll have another home date against Valley Mills. That's no pushover. They're going to be at Holly on September the 20th, and then they play host to Munster on September the 27th before an open date and then into district. That is a very tough non-district schedule.
Yeah, they're going to get tested through those first 5 games. And then they open district with a couple of toughies as well. October 11th at Hyco, both on the road. October 18th at Coleman. So 2 big district games right off the bat where they have to go away from their home field to play them. And they finally get a home game against Ballinger on October 25th before going to Bangs on November 1st. And then they wrap up their district schedule with another tough home game against Hamilton. So a really tough schedule from top to bottom. There are not many gimmies on that slate.
All right, and with that, we're going to take a look at what we believe will be the game of the year for DeLeon. We take a look at the possible games of the year for every team that we preview. Dan, how do you see it? And there's actually a number of games that you can go
Yeah.
with on DeLeon's slate.
I was thinking the same thing. This is a challenging question, honestly. I think there are three games that you could point to as the game of the year. I'm going to go with that season, the regular season finale at home against Hamilton. I think that has a potential to be potentially for a district championship, but there are also two other huge ones right off the bat with those two road games at Heiko and Coleman that'll kind of decide how big that Hamilton game is. But before the season starts, I'm going to go with that Hamilton game as the game of the year.
Oh, wow, man, I'm having a hard time with
Yeah,
this
it's a
one.
challenge.
This is interesting. I think it depends on how good they are.
Mhm.
Frankly, I mean, if they're as good as they believe that they're going to be, that second game against Coleman is big. That could be for a possible district championship. Um, I prefer to look at the very first district game and getting out of the chute early as going to as important. That's going to be very important for DeLeon because this is a tough district, and
Mhm.
three of their five games in district are going to be on the road. They got a
Mhm.
road date at Heiko in that first game, that home, the opener in district. I see that as very important. If they can win that one and get some momentum, then you're in a better position when you take on a Coleman or a Hamilton later on. At least you got a win under your belt. I see them as clear favorites against Ballinger and Bangs. Winning that first one against Heiko, I would feel a lot better if I'm De Leon if I win that one. I think that's the game of the year.
Yeah, and
I
we've
wouldn't want
kind
to
of
start 0-1 in this district.
no, and we've kind of talked about in the past that Heiko's the one team. Everybody kind of points to Coleman and Hamilton is the biggest challenge. Heiko's kind of the unsung team in that district that's sneaky
Telling you.
tough. That's a team you've
Yep.
got to look out for. Just their style of play, their toughness, their physicality. That's a team you've got to account for. So I think that's a good pick as well.
You're talking about a team that can hold you to three possessions and a half. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen them do it, and that's just brutally frustrating. So you have no margin for error.
Mm,
That's a tough matchup for everybody.
mm.
So yeah, I that road date at Heiko, if I'm dealing on, I'm wanting that one bad. It gets me off on the right foot in a very tough district.
Yeah, and it tells you how tough the district is that neither one of us picked that Coleman game because Coleman has been outside of Toller has been the class of that district. So
Yes.
it's a tough district. It's gonna be a lot of fun to follow this year.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Countdown to Two-A-Days, the Leon Bearcats. But before we do that, we want to remind you that August 21st is the big night here at Big Country Preps. That's when we release our preseason preview, which previews every single team of the Big Country, some teams on the outside of the Big Country, and six man as well. And this year, and by the way, it's the most complex and most complete look at Big Country high school football that you're going to get from any media source. Nobody compares. We'll have a preview for every team, a player feature for every team. We'll have videos, we'll have photos, we'll have opinion pieces. You name it, we're going to have it. Nobody's going to top us. And it's getting even bigger this year. And Dan will tell you about that.
Yeah, our coverage area is expanding by 5 schools this year. Our base 40 11-man schools is growing to 45 with the addition of Mineral Wells, Glen Rose, Graham, Toller, and Miles. We are super excited about adding those five to the mix. We hope y'all are excited to follow our coverage of those teams throughout the school year. In the meantime, we thank you for joining us for this episode of our Countdown to 2 Days series, and we hope that you return tomorrow when we preview those Heiko Tigers here at BigCountryPreps.com.